The rain drummed against the apartment window as Eric Jones stood in the doorway of his bedroom, watching Raymond Morris sleep peacefully in his bed. 3 months ago, this scene would have seemed impossible. 3 months ago, Raymond had been his straight best friend who complained about his girlfriend and made jokes about never understanding gay relationships. Now Raymond was curled up in Eric's sheets, wearing one of Eric's oversized t-shirts, looking more at home than Eric had ever seen him anywhere else. Eric's chest tightened with a familiar mix of disbelief and overwhelming gratitude. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting golden streaks across Raymond's dark hair, and Eric found himself memorizing the moment like he had memorized so many others over the past few weeks. "You're staring again," Raymond murmured, without opening his eyes, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Eric felt heat rise in his cheeks. Maybe. Raymond finally opened his eyes, those warm brown eyes that had been haunting Eric's dreams for years, and the smile that spread across his face made Eric's heart skip. "Come back to bed. I was just making coffee." "The coffee can wait." Raymond reached out, fingers finding the hem of Eric's shirt and tugging gently. Code 5. Eric laughed softly, allowing himself to be pulled back into bed, into Raymond's arms, into this new reality that still felt too good to be true. "I was gone for 10 minutes. 10 minutes too long," Raymond whispered against Eric's neck, and Eric closed his eyes, letting himself sink into the warmth and safety of being held by the person he had loved silently for so long. But to understand how they had arrived at this moment, the story needed to begin 3 months earlier, when everything had started to shift. Eric had been grading papers at his kitchen table on a Tuesday evening when Raymond had shown up at his door, looking more disheveled than usual. His hair was messed up like he had been running his hands through it repeatedly, and there was something in his expression that Eric couldn't quite read. "Hey," Raymond said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Can I come in?" "Of course." Eric stepped aside, watching as Raymond entered the apartment with the familiar ease of someone who had been there countless times before. But something was different tonight. "Want some coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "Yeah, that sounds good." Raymond followed Eric into the kitchen, but instead of sitting at the table like he usually did, he leaned against the counter, watching Eric move around the space. Eric could feel Raymond's eyes on him as he poured 2 mugs of coffee, adding cream to Raymond's without asking because he knew exactly how Raymond liked it. They had been friends for 5 years, roommates for 2 of those years before Raymond had moved in with his girlfriend Angela. "So what's going on?" Eric asked, handing Raymond his mug and settling into his usual chair at the small kitchen table. Raymond didn't sit down. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee and continued to lean against the counter, his free hand drumming against his thigh in a nervous rhythm that Eric recognized. "Hilda." Eric's heart did that familiar twist it always did when Raymond brought up his girlfriend. For 2 years, Eric had been listening to Raymond's relationship troubles, offering advice and support while carefully hiding the fact that every story about Angela made him want to scream. Not because Angela was a bad person, but because Eric was desperately, hopelessly in love with his best friend. Eric asked, keeping his voice neutral and supportive. Raymond set his mug down and ran both hands through his hair. Raymond's voice was frustrated. "Maybe it's like I try to connect with her, but something always feels off, like I'm playing a role or something." Eric's chest tightened. This was a conversation they had been having in various forms for months, and each time it left Eric feeling more hopeless and more guilty. Quote 20, Eric asked carefully. Raymond was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his coffee. When he looked up, there was something vulnerable in his expression that made Eric's breath catch. "It's going to sound crazy. Try me. Sometimes I feel like I'm pretending to be someone else when I'm with her, like I'm performing what I think a boyfriend should be instead of just being myself." Raymond paused, then added quietly, "I never feel that way when I'm here." Eric's heart started beating faster. To 25, quote 25. Raymond looked directly at Eric. Quote 27. Eric swallowed hard. Quote 100, quote 100. Raymond continued, pushing off from the counter and starting to pace around Eric's small kitchen. "I keep finding myself wanting to come here instead of going home. Like after work, my first instinct is to drive here, not to the apartment I share with Angela." "Raymond," And yesterday, Angela was talking about moving in together permanently, maybe getting engaged. And instead of feeling excited, I felt like I couldn't breathe. Raymond stopped pacing and looked at Eric with an expression that was equal parts confused and desperate. What's wrong with me? Eric wanted to tell him. God, how he wanted to tell Raymond that nothing was wrong with him, that maybe he was just with the wrong person, that maybe what he was looking for was sitting right here at this kitchen table. Nothing's wrong with you, Eric said instead. Maybe you're just not ready for that level of commitment. But I'm 28 years old. I should be ready, right? I should want to build a life with someone. You can't force yourself to want something just because you think you should. Raymond stopped pacing and looked at Eric with an intensity that made Eric's skin feel too tight. Quote 38. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Eric didn't dare examine too closely. Instead, he took a sip of his coffee and tried to keep his voice steady. Then maybe you need to figure out who the right person is. Raymond was quiet for a long moment. Then he moved to the table and sat down across from Eric. Can I ask you something? Always. How do you know when you're really in love with someone? Eric's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. This was dangerous territory, but Raymond was looking at him with such genuine curiosity that Eric couldn't deflect. I think, Eric said carefully, real love feels easy. Like you don't have to work to be yourself around them. Like they see all of you, even the parts you are not proud of, and they choose you anyway. Have you ever felt that way about someone? Eric's heart was pounding so hard, he was sure Raymond could hear it. Eric met Raymond's eyes, and for a moment he considered telling the truth. Instead, he looked down at his hands. It was complicated. Complicated how? They were with someone else. Raymond leaned forward slightly. Did you ever tell them how you felt? No. Why not? Eric forced himself to look up to meet Raymond's gaze. Quote 54. Something shifted in Raymond's expression, a flicker of understanding that was there and gone so quickly Eric might have imagined it. That must have been really hard, Raymond said softly. It was. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them. Finally, Raymond reached across the table and covered Eric's hand with his own. The touch sent electricity up Eric's arm, and he had to resist the urge to turn his hand over and intertwine their fingers. It's okay. No, it's not. Raymond's thumb brushed across Eric's knuckles, and Eric's breath dimmer. Quote to 60 Wayne. Eric stared down at their joined hands, trying to memorize the feeling of Raymond's skin against his own. So do you. When Eric looked up, Raymond was watching him with an expression that was soft and searching. For a moment, Eric thought Raymond might say something else, might push the conversation into territory that would change everything between them. Instead, Raymond squeezed Eric's hand once and then pulled away. Raymond said, though he made no move to stand up. Eric offered, trying to keep his voice casual. Raymond's face lit up. That sounds perfect. They ordered from their usual place and settled on Eric's couch to watch an old action movie they had both seen a dozen times. But Eric found himself unable to concentrate on the screen because Raymond had chosen to sit closer than usual, their shoulders touching. Halfway through the movie, Raymond shifted and ended up with his head resting against Eric's shoulder. Eric held his breath, afraid to move and break the moment. This is nice, Raymond murmured. Yeah? Yeah, I feel like I can actually relax here. Eric's chest filled with warmth. Quote 69, quote 70. The question was asked so softly that Eric almost wasn't sure he had heard it correctly. Especially then. Raymond tilted his head to look up at Eric, and their faces were suddenly much closer than they had ever been before. Eric could see the flecks of gold in Raymond's brown eyes, could feel the warmth of Raymond's breath against his skin. Eric, Raymond whispered, and there was something in his voice that made Eric's heart race. For a moment, Eric thought Raymond was going to say something that would change everything. Instead, Raymond smiled and settled back against Eric's shoulder. Thank you for always being here. Eric closed his eyes and tried to ignore the way his heart was breaking and soaring at the same time. Always. That night marked the beginning of a pattern. Raymond started showing up at Eric's apartment more frequently, often without calling first, always with some excuse about needing to get away from Angela or wanting Eric's opinion on something. But Eric began to notice that Raymond seemed to relax the moment he walked through Eric's door. The visits became longer. Raymond would arrive after work and stay until late at night, helping Eric cook dinner, grading papers together at the kitchen table, falling asleep on Eric's couch during movies. Sometimes Eric would wake up in the morning to find Raymond still there, curled up under the throw blanket Eric had started keeping on the couch specifically for these occasions. "You know you have your own apartment, right?" Eric teased one morning, finding Raymond making coffee in Eric's kitchen like he lived there. Quote 77. Raymond replied, not meeting Eric's eyes. Eric knew it wasn't about the coffee, but Eric didn't push because he was selfish enough to want Raymond there, even if it was slowly killing him. The physical contact increased too. Raymond had always been casually affectionate, but now there were longer hugs, hands that lingered when they brushed against each other, Raymond's fingers playing with the fabric of Eric's shirt while they watched movies. Eric tried to tell himself he was reading too much into it, that Raymond was just going through a rough patch with Angela and needed the comfort of friendship. But there were moments when he caught Raymond looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. 3 weeks after that first conversation in Eric's kitchen, Raymond showed up on a Friday night looking more upset than Eric had ever seen him. "We broke up," Raymond said the moment Eric opened the door. Eric's heart jumped, but he kept his expression neutral. Quote 79. Quote 81. Eric's blood ran cold. "And what do you mean?" Raymond pushed past Eric into the apartment, running his hands through his hair in that familiar gesture of frustration. "She said I talk about you all the time, that I spend more time here than at home, that I light up when I'm talking about you in a way I never do when I'm talking about her." Eric's mouth went dry. "Talk to Marty," to quote, and Raymond turned to face Eric, and there was something raw and desperate in his expression. Quote out on Eric's heart was pounding so hard he could barely hear his own thoughts. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I think I've been lying to myself about a lot of things." Raymond took a step closer to Eric. "I'm saying that when Angela accused me of being in love with my best friend, I couldn't deny it." The words hit Eric like a physical blow. He stared at Raymond, searching his face for any sign that this was some kind of cruel joke or misunderstanding. "You're in love with me?" Eric whispered. "I think I have been for a long time," Raymond said, his voice shaking slightly. "I just didn't know how to admit it to myself. I kept telling myself that what I felt for you was just friendship, that the reason I couldn't connect with Angela was because I wasn't trying hard enough. But the truth is, I was comparing every moment with her to moments with you, and she never stood a chance." Eric felt like the world had tilted off its axis. "Raymond, I know this is crazy," Raymond rushed on. "I know I'm probably ruining everything between us. But I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I couldn't keep lying to myself or to you." "You're not ruining anything," Eric said, his voice barely audible. Raymond's eyes widened. "Shadarn." Eric took a shaky breath, trying to find the words for something he had been keeping locked inside his heart for years. Quote us, the silence that followed was deafening. Raymond stared at Eric like he couldn't quite believe what he had heard. "You have?" "Yes." Eric felt tears prick at his eyes. "For 5 years I've been in love with you. Every time you told me about Angela, every time you asked me for relationship advice, every time you fell asleep on my couch, I was dying inside because I wanted to be the person you chose. But I never thought—" "You never thought what?" "I never thought you could feel the same way." Raymond closed the distance between them in 2 quick steps, his hands coming up to cup Eric's face. "What do you want, dude?" Eric's breath caught. "Are you sure this isn't just because you're upset about Angela?" "This has nothing to do with Angela," Raymond said firmly. "This is about the fact that I've been running to you every time I needed comfort, every time I needed to feel like myself, every time I needed to remember what it felt like to be truly happy." Eric searched Raymond's face, looking for any sign of doubt or confusion. Instead, he found only certainty and a love so deep it took his breath away. "Chapter 107, Raymond whispered. Eric's answer was to close the remaining distance between them, pressing his lips to Raymond's in a kiss that was soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Raymond's arms came around him, pulling him closer. The kiss was everything Eric had dreamed it would be and more. Raymond's lips were warm and soft, and he kissed into Eric like he was something precious, something he had been waiting his whole life to find. When they finally broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. Raymond whispered, resting his forehead against Eric's. Yeah, wow. I can't believe we waited so long to do that. Eric laughed, the sound shaky with emotion. I can't believe you feel the same way I do. I do, Raymond said, his hand still cupping Eric's face. Quote 113, quote 14, Eric said without hesitation. Quote 1 to 15. They spent that night talking until dawn, curled up together on Eric's couch, sharing stories and confessions and gentle kisses. Raymond told Eric about the moment he had realized his feelings, how it had been when Eric had gotten food poisoning 6 months earlier, and Raymond had spent the entire weekend taking care of him. How natural and right it had felt to be the person Eric needed. Eric told Raymond about all the moments he had fallen a little deeper in love, the way Raymond laughed at Eric's terrible jokes, the way he remembered small details about Eric's day, the way he had always made Eric feel seen and valued in ways that no one else ever had. I used to lie awake at night wondering what it would be like to hold you, Eric admitted, as the sun started to rise outside his windows. And now you know, Raymond said, tightening his arms around Eric. And now I know. The transition from friends to something more wasn't without its challenges. Raymond had to deal with the aftermath of his breakup with Angela, who had been hurt but not entirely surprised by the revelation. Eric had to learn to trust that Raymond's feelings were real and lasting, not just a reaction to the end of his heterosexual relationship, but the foundation they had built over 5 years of friendship served them well. They already knew each other's rhythms, already felt comfortably in each other's spaces, already had the deep trust and communication that many couples spent years trying to build. Raymond started staying over more often, first on the couch, then in Eric's bed when Eric had shyly asked if Raymond wanted to sleep next to him instead of on the living room furniture. The first night they had slept in the same bed, Eric had been so nervous he could barely close his eyes. But Raymond had simply pulled Eric against his chest and whispered, quote 119, quote, and Eric had melted into the warmth and safety of being held by the person he loved. They took things slowly physically, both of them wanting to savor each new level of intimacy. Their first real makeout session happened 2 weeks after their first kiss, and Eric had been amazed by how natural it felt, how perfectly their bodies seemed to fit together. Raymond had murmured against Eric's neck afterward. Now I get it. Yeah? Yeah, it's like electricity, but warm. Like coming home, but exciting at the same time. Eric had laughed, pressing a kiss to Raymond's temple. Quote 124, quote 112. The words had made Eric's heart flutter, because even though they said, I love you to each other regularly now, Raymond still found ways to make Eric feel like the most important person in the world. A month after they had gotten together, Raymond officially moved out of the apartment he had shared with Angela and moved back in with Eric. It felt like the most natural thing in the world, like Raymond had never really left. Are you sure you want to do this? Eric had asked as they carried Raymond's boxes up the stairs. Quote 1 to quote 29. Raymond had said, setting down a box and turning to face him. Quote wordy. Quote wordy. Quote wordy. Raymond had agreed, sealing the statement with a kiss that made Eric's knees weak. Living together officially was even better than Eric had imagined. They fell into routines easily, sharing cooking duties and household chores, working together at the kitchen table in the evenings, curling up on the couch to watch movies with Raymond's head in Eric's lap or Eric's head on Raymond's shoulder. But the best part was the mornings. Eric had always been an early riser, and he loved having those quiet moments to watch Raymond sleep, to appreciate the way the morning light caught in his hair, to marvel at the fact that this beautiful, kind, funny man had chosen him. You know, Raymond said one morning, catching Eric in his usual morning observation, most people would find it creepy that you watch me sleep. Most people don't get to wake up next to you, Eric replied, not even embarrassed about being caught anymore. Fair point. Raymond stretched and pulled Eric closer. Besides, I like it. Makes me feel loved. You are loved. I know. Raymond's smile was soft and content. Qual and Ushsi, 3 months into their relationship, Eric still sometimes couldn't believe this was his life. There were moments when he would catch Raymond humming while he made coffee, or when Raymond would absently reach for Eric's hand while they were walking, or when Raymond would look at him with such open adoration that Eric felt like he might burst from happiness. The first time Raymond said he wanted to introduce Eric as his boyfriend to his family, Eric had panicked. Eric had asked, his anxiety spiking. Donor for Mr. Quadupert, Raymond had said gently, taking Eric's hands in his own. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm 28 years old. I'm in love with an amazing man, and I want my family to know about the most important person in my life. But what if they don't accept it? Accept us? Then that's their loss. But I think they will. My mom has been asking why I seem so much happier lately. I want to tell her it's because I finally figured out what I was missing. Raymond's confidence had been infectious, and Eric had found himself agreeing to the family dinner with less terror than he had expected. Raymond's family had been surprised but ultimately supportive, his mother even admitting that she had wondered if Raymond might be gay, given how much he talked about Eric. I always thought it was interesting how your face would light up whenever you mentioned Eric, she had said over dessert. Now it makes sense. Coming out to their friends had been easier than either of them had expected. Most of their mutual friends had reacted with some version of, finally, or, we were wondering when you two would figure it out. You guys were pretty obvious, their friend Lewis had said when they had told him. The way you looked at each other, the way Raymond couldn't go more than 5 minutes without mentioning Eric. We were all just waiting for you to catch up. Their relationship continued to deepen as the months passed. They learned each other's bodies with the same patience and care they had learned each other's minds and hearts. Physical intimacy with Raymond felt as natural and right as everything else between them. Another way of expressing the love they shared. I never knew it could feel like this, Raymond had whispered one night as they lay tangled together in Eric's bed. Quote 154, quote 155, Eric had smiled, pressing a kiss to Raymond's collarbone. I know exactly what you mean. They had their first real fight 4 months into their relationship over something stupid that Eric couldn't even remember afterward. But what he did remember was how they had worked through it, how they had both been committed to understanding each other's perspectives, how they had apologized and made up and somehow ended up even closer than before. I was terrified we were going to break up, Eric had admitted afterward. Eric, Raymond had said, cupping Eric's face in his hands, quote 159, quote 160, quote 161, quote 162, Eric had said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. 6 months in, they started talking about the future in concrete terms. Raymond wanted to go back to school to get his master's degree. Eric was considering applying for a teaching position at a different school. They made these plans together, factoring each other into every decision. Is it too soon to be planning our lives together? Eric asked one night as they lay in bed discussing Raymond's graduate school options. Eric considered the question seriously. Quote 165, quote 1661, the certainty in Raymond's voice made Eric's heart flutter. Even after all these months together, Raymond still had the power to make Eric feel like the luckiest man alive. Quote 7. Raymond continued, quote 160, Eric's breath caught. Raymond, I know we haven't been together very long in the grand scheme of things, but Eric, I've loved you for years. Being with you romantically has just confirmed what I already knew, that you're the person I want to spend my life with. Eric felt tears prick at his eyes. You're the person I want to spend my life with too. Then let's do it. Let's build something beautiful together. Okay, Eric whispered. Yes, let's do it. They sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted like forever. A year into their relationship, Raymond proposed. It wasn't a grand gesture or a public display. It was just the two of them on a quiet Sunday morning, drinking coffee in their kitchen, Raymond looking across the table at Eric with that soft smile that still made Eric's heart skip. Marry me, Raymond said as casually as if he were asking Eric to pass the sugar. Eric's coffee mug froze halfway to his lips. Raymond repeated, reaching across the table to take Eric's free hand. I know we've talked about building a life together, and I want to make it official. I want to be your husband. I want you to be mine. Eric set down his coffee mug with shaking hands. Are you serious? Dead serious. Raymond brought Eric's hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to his knuckles. Quote, so, and Eric said without hesitation. Quote, Raymond's face lit up with joy, and he launched himself around the table to pull Eric into his arms, spinning him around the small kitchen while they both laughed and cried at the same time. Planning their wedding was surprisingly easy. They both wanted something small and intimate, just their families and closest friends. They wanted to focus on the commitment they were making to each other rather than on elaborate decorations or expensive vendors. They ended up having the ceremony in the backyard of Raymond's parents' house, with Eric's sister Amy officiating and their friend Eugene playing guitar. It was perfect in its simplicity, full of love and laughter, and the kind of joy that comes from two people who have found their home in each other. When it came time for vows, Eric found himself struggling to find words big enough to encompass what Raymond meant to him. Eric began, his voice shaking slightly. He paused, looking into Raymond's eyes, which were bright with unshed tears. But the most amazing thing is that somewhere along the way, you became my home. You became the person I couldn't imagine living without. The person who made me want to be better, braver, more open to love than I ever thought possible. Eric's voice broke slightly, but he continued. Quote 187. Raymond was crying openly now, and Eric felt his own tears spill over. Quote 108. When Raymond spoke his vows, his voice was steady despite the tears streaming down his face. Quote 29. Raymond reached up to wipe a tear from Eric's cheek. You taught me that love isn't supposed to be hard work all the time, that the right person doesn't make you question yourself or change who you are, that real love feels like coming home and going on an adventure at the same time. Eric smiled through his tears, recognizing his own words reflected back at him. I promise to never take for granted the gift of being loved by you. I promise to create a safe space for your dreams, your fears, your hopes, and your heart. I promise to laugh with you, cry with you, grow with you, and love you more deeply with each passing year. When Amy pronounced them married and told them they could kiss, Eric felt like his heart might explode from happiness. Raymond's lips were salty with tears, and the kiss was soft and sweet and full of promise. Raymond whispered against Eric's lips. Hello, husband, Eric whispered back. The reception was held in the same backyard, with string lights and simple decorations and food that Raymond's mother and Erica's sister had insisted on making themselves. During their first dance, Raymond held Eric close and whispered in his ear, Any regrets? Eric pulled back to look at his husband's face, taking in the happiness shining in Raymond's eyes. Only that it took us so long to get here. We got here when we were supposed to, Raymond said, when we were ready. I'm ready for everything with you. Everything? Everything. 2 years into their marriage, they bought a house. It was a small craftsman bungalow with a big backyard and room for the family they hoped to have someday. Eric had fallen in love with it immediately, but it was Raymond's reaction that had sealed the deal. Quote Tuhoan, Raymond had said, standing in the empty living room. Quote Tuhoan, Eric had asked, his heart skipping. Quote Tarshish, they had talked about having children in abstract terms, but standing in that empty house, Eric could suddenly see it too. Quote Shayan, Eric had said, reaching for Raymond's hand, I want that. I want all of it. With you. Moving into their own place had been another milestone in their relationship. They painted walls together, chose furniture together, created a space that was uniquely theirs. The process of trying to adopt a child was long and sometimes frustrating, but it also brought them closer together. They supported each other through the paperwork and interviews, the waiting and the uncertainty. When they were finally matched with a birth mother who was looking for a loving family for her baby, Eric had cried with relief and gratitude. We're going to be parents, Raymond had said, holding Eric while they both processed the news. We're going to be parents, Eric had repeated, still hardly able to believe it. Their daughter Sarah was born on a rainy Tuesday in March, and Eric fell in love with her the moment he saw her. She was tiny and perfect, with dark hair like Raymond's and curious eyes that seemed to take in everything around her. Raymond whispered, cradling Sarah in his arms while Eric sat beside them in the hospital chair. Poptown Hutter in the Hen. Quote 211. Quote Town, parenthood was everything Eric had hoped it would be, and also completely different from what he had expected. It was harder than he had imagined, but also more rewarding. Watching Raymond with Sarah was one of Eric's greatest joys. Raymond was a natural father, patient and loving, and completely devoted to their daughter. Sarah grew into a happy, curious toddler who had Raymond's smile and Eric's love of books. She was the center of their world, but somehow her presence had made their marriage even stronger rather than putting strain on it. "Do you ever miss it being just the two of us?" Eric asked one evening after they had finally gotten Sarah to sleep. "Sometimes," Raymond admitted. "I miss being able to have a conversation without being interrupted, and I miss sleeping through the night, but I wouldn't trade this for anything." "Me neither." "Besides," Raymond added, pulling Eric closer, "we're still us. We're just us, plus this amazing little person who made our family complete." When Sarah was 3, they started talking about having another child. The process was easier the second time around, and their son Anthony joined their family when Sarah was 4. Watching Sarah become a big sister was one of the most beautiful things Eric had ever witnessed. "Baby!" Sarah had exclaimed when she first met Anthony, her face lighting up with pure joy. "My baby!" "Our baby," Raymond had corrected gently, but he was smiling as he said it. With 2 children, their house felt full in the best possible way. There was always noise and laughter, always someone who needed attention or comfort, always new milestones to celebrate. Eric and Raymond had to work harder to find time for each other, but they made it a priority, knowing that their relationship was the foundation that everything else was built on. "Date night is sacred," Raymond would say whenever they were tempted to cancel their weekly evening out together. "We owe it to ourselves and to the kids to keep our marriage strong." Those few hours alone together each week, talking without interruption, remembering why they had fallen in love in the first place, were essential to maintaining their connection amid the beautiful chaos of family life. "Do you ever think about how different our lives would be if we had never figured it out?" Eric asked one evening over dinner at their favorite restaurant. "You mean if we had stayed just friends?" "Yeah." Raymond was quiet for a moment, considering. "Sometimes, but I try not to dwell on it because it makes me sad to think about all the time we wasted being scared." "We weren't wasted," Eric said. "That time made us who we are. It gave us the foundation we needed." "Maybe, but I still wish I had been braver sooner." "I wish I had been braver too. But we got here eventually, and that's what matters." Raymond reached across the table to take Eric's hand, his wedding ring catching the light from the restaurant's candles. "We got here eventually," he agreed, "and now we have everything." As the years passed, their love continued to deepen and evolve. They weathered the challenges that all couples face: job stress and financial worries, disagreements about parenting decisions, the occasional bout of taking each other for granted. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that they were on the same team, always chose love over pride or fear. When Sarah started kindergarten, Eric cried harder than she did. "She's growing up so fast," he said to Raymond that evening. "I know, but look how amazing she is. Look how confident and kind and smart she is. We did that." "We did, didn't we?" "We did." Anthony's first steps, Sarah's first lost tooth, family vacations to the beach, birthday parties in their backyard, bedtime stories and scraped knees and proud moments at school plays. All of it wove together into the rich tapestry of their family life. "I never imagined I could be this happy," Eric told Raymond on their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on their back porch after the kids had gone to bed, sharing a bottle of wine and looking up at the stars. "Not even when we were friends and you were secretly in love with me?" Eric laughed. "Especially not then. Then I thought the most I could hope for was to keep you in my life as a friend and try to be satisfied with that. I'm glad you didn't have to settle for that. I'm glad you figured out you love me back. Best decision I ever made. Marrying me. Letting myself love you," Raymond corrected. "Everything else just followed from that." Eric leaned over to kiss his husband, tasting wine and contentment and the promise of many more years together. "I love you, Raymond Morris." "I love you too, Eric Jones." Some names never changed, even after marriage. Even after years of being husband and husband, father and father, partners in every sense of the word. They were still Eric and Raymond, still the same people who had fallen in love over coffee in Eric's kitchen, still the same couple who had been afraid to risk their friendship for something more. But they had taken the risk, and it had given them everything. On a quiet Sunday morning 15 years after that first conversation in Eric's kitchen, Eric woke up in their bed in their house, surrounded by the life they had built together. Raymond was still asleep beside him, older now, with silver threading through his dark hair and laugh lines around his eyes, but still the most beautiful person Eric had ever seen. Sarah, now 18 and about to leave for college, was probably still asleep in her room. Anthony, 14 and all arms and legs and attitude, was likely already awake and making noise in the kitchen. This was Eric's favorite time of day, these quiet moments before the family woke up fully, when he could appreciate the peace and contentment of his life. He thought about the young man he had been, so afraid of losing Raymond's friendship that he had been willing to hide his love forever. He thought about Raymond, struggling to understand why his heterosexual relationships never felt quite right, not knowing that what he was looking for was right there beside him. They had been so scared, both of them, so certain that admitting their feelings would ruin everything. Instead, it had given them everything. "You're thinking very loudly over there," Raymond murmured without opening his eyes. Eric smiled, settling back against his pillow. "Sorry, did I wake you?" "No, but I can feel you being contemplative. What's on your mind?" "Just thinking about how we got here." Raymond opened his eyes then, turning to face Eric with that soft morning smile that Eric had been waking up to for over a decade. "Any regrets?" It was the same question Raymond had asked on their wedding day, and Eric's answer was the same now as it had been then. "Britannia, quote on him," Raymond said, echoing his response from their wedding day. "Quote on us on, quote to fun, quote on." Eric reached out to trace the line of Raymond's jaw, still marveling at the fact that he was allowed to touch this man whenever he wanted, that Raymond was his husband, his partner, his home. "I'm grateful for every day we've had together," Eric said. "Even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. Those are the days that proved we could weather anything together." From downstairs, they could hear Anthony moving around in the kitchen, probably looking for cereal. Soon Sarah would wake up, and their quiet morning would give way to the cheerful chaos of family breakfast. But for now, it was just the two of them, still Eric and Raymond, still in love after all these years. "Dad, Papa, where's the good cereal?" Anthony's voice carried up the stairs, and Raymond groaned. Quote 263. Quote, say, Eric asked, not ready to leave the cocoon of their bedroom just yet. Quote 265. Raymond agreed, pulling Eric closer. They lay there in comfortable silence, listening to their son rummaging around downstairs, knowing that soon Sarah would wake up and their house would fill with the sounds of their family starting another day. But for these few precious minutes, it was just them, just Eric and Raymond, still amazed by the love they had found in each other, still grateful for the risk they had taken, still building a life together one day at a time. Quote 266. Eric whispered, quote to 267. Raymond whispered back. And in that moment, lying in their bed in their house with their children starting to wake up around them, Eric felt the same overwhelming gratitude he had felt that first night when Raymond had told him he was in love with him. They had taken the biggest risk of their lives when they had decided to cross the line from friendship to love, and it had given them everything they had ever wanted and more than they had ever dared to dream. When they got downstairs, they found Anthony standing in front of the open pantry, looking frustrated. Quote 268, he announced dramatically. Quote Shaum, Eric said, ruffling his son's hair. You just don't want any of it. Same thing. How about pancakes? Raymond suggested, already moving toward the stove. Anthony's face lit up. Quote down, quote down, Anthony yelled up the stairs instead of actually going to get her. Sure enough, Sarah appeared at the top of the stairs a few minutes later, her hair messy from sleep, and wearing one of Raymond's old college t-shirts that she had claimed as pajamas. Did someone say pancakes? They fell into the familiar rhythm of cooking together. Eric mixing batter while Raymond heated the pan, Sarah setting the table while Anthony poured orange juice for everyone. It was such an ordinary moment, the kind they had shared thousands of times over the years. But Eric found himself appreciating it with fresh eyes. This was what they had built together. This warm, chaotic, love-filled kitchen. These children who felt safe and cherished and confident in their place in the world. This partnership that had grown stronger with each passing year. What's the plan for today? Sarah asked as they sat down to eat. I need to grade papers, Eric said, and your dad has that project he's working on. Boring, BTE, Anthony pronounced. What about you two? Any exciting plans? I'm going to Judith's house later, Sarah said. We're working on our history project. I'm going to beat the new video game Eugene gave me, Anthony announced. Sounds like a perfect Sunday, Raymond said, and Eric could hear the contentment in his voice. After breakfast, the kids disappeared to their respective activities, and Eric and Raymond settled at the kitchen table with their laptops, working companionably in the same space like they had been doing for years. Remember when we used to do this when we were just friends? Raymond asked during one of these moments. You mean when you would come over to escape Angela and we would sit at the same table pretending we were just friends? That's the one. I remember thinking how perfect it felt, having you here, working together like that, but also thinking it was torture because I wanted so much more. I remember feeling like I could breathe when I was here with you, like I could finally be myself. Eric reached across the table to take Raymond's hand. Oh, 291, quote to 292. They worked for another hour before Raymond closed his laptop and stretched. Quote to 293, quote to 2094. They had been taking walks together for years, first as friends, then as boyfriends, then as husbands, then as parents pushing strollers, and now as empty nesters in training whose kids were old enough to stay home alone for a few hours. Quote 295. Raymond said as they walked hand in hand down their quiet street. According to 96, quote a sounded, quote tightened, and quote yen, quote Don, and Eric squeezed Raymond's hand. We won't lose it. We've made it this far, haven't we? We have, and we'll make it a lot farther. Promise? Promise. When they got home, they found Sarah and Anthony in the living room, Sarah reading on the couch while Anthony played his video game on the floor in front of the TV. Eric and Raymond settled on the couch on either side of Sarah, Raymond picking up his book while Eric pulled out his phone to check his email. Dad, Sarah said suddenly, looking up from her book. Yeah? How did you know Papa was the one? Eric's heart skipped, and he glanced over at Raymond, who had looked up from his book with interest. About 300, Eric said carefully, quote through on my quote friend. Eric looked at Raymond again, and Raymond nodded encouragingly. Quote 3 when Eric began, quote 3 on in, quote 2 quote 2 surfing, quote 3 for fun, quote 3 sitting. Sarah looked over at Raymond. Quote 3 signing lunch. Raymond smiled, reaching over to squeeze Eric's hand. I knew because your dad made me want to be the best version of myself, because I felt more like myself when I was with him than I did anywhere else, because every time I tried to imagine my future, he was always in it. That's so romantic, Sarah said with a sigh. It was also really scary, Eric added. Taking that risk, telling each other how we felt, it was one of the hardest things we've ever done. But it was worth it? More than worth it, Raymond said. It gave us everything. Our marriage, our family, this life we've built together. Do you think I'll find someone like that someday? Eric's heart squeezed at the vulnerability in his daughter's voice. I hope so, sweetheart. But remember, the most important thing is that you know yourself first. You have to be comfortable with who you are before you can find someone who loves you for who you are. And don't settle, Raymond added. Don't stay with someone just because it's easy or because you think you should. Wait for someone who makes you feel the way your dad makes me feel. How do I feel, Eric asked, curious. Like home, Raymond said simply. Like everything is going to be okay as long as we're together. Sarah made a soft "aw" sound, and even Anthony looked up from his video game to roll his eyes at his parents. You guys are so gross, Anthony said, but he was smiling as he said it. We're in love, Eric said unapologetically. It's supposed to be a little gross. Eric looked around at his family, his husband, and his children, all of them comfortable and happy and secure in the love they shared. This was what he and Raymond had built together. This warm, chaotic, imperfect, beautiful life. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Eric and Raymond sat on their back porch with glasses of wine, looking up at the stars and talking about their day. That was a good conversation with Sarah, Raymond said. Yeah, it was. I'm glad she feels comfortable with asking us about that stuff. I hope we gave her good advice. I think we did. The most important thing is that she knows what real love looks like because she's seen it. You think we've been good role models? Eric turned to look at his husband, taking in the familiar lines of his face, the way the porch light caught the silver in his hair, the contentment in his expression. I think we've shown our kids what it looks like when two people choose each other every day, when they support each other through everything, when they build a life together based on love and respect and partnership. If that's not a good role model, I don't know what is. I love our life, Raymond said quietly. I love our life too. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood, enjoying the peace of being together without the need for conversation. I have something to tell you, Raymond said eventually. Eric's heart skipped. Even after all these years, unexpected announcements still made him nervous. Eric's face broke into a huge smile. Raymond had been working toward this promotion for months. Raymond, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I wanted to wait until we were alone. I wanted to savor the moment with just you. Eric leaned over to kiss his husband, tasting wine and happiness and pride. I'm so proud of you. Thank you for supporting me through all of this, for listening to me stress about it, and for believing in me even when I didn't believe in myself. That's what husbands do. Is it? The good ones do. Raymond smiled, pulling Eric closer on the porch swing they had installed when Anthony was little. I love you, Eric Jones. I love you too, Raymond Morris. Some things never got old, Eric thought as he settled against his husband's side. Some things like saying, quote, 356, quote, to the person who had been your best friend, your boyfriend, your husband, your partner, and everything for over 15 years, never lost their power to make your heart skip and your world feel complete. They had started as friends who were too scared to risk everything for love. They had become husbands who had built a life together that was richer and more beautiful than either of them had ever imagined possible. Quote 357, Raymond asked, noticing Eric's contemplative mood. Just how lucky we are. Lucky? Lucky that we found each other. Lucky that we were brave enough to take the risk. Lucky that it worked out the way it did. I don't think luck had much to do with it, Raymond said. I think we worked for this. We chose each other every day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. Especially then. Eric closed his eyes and listened to the steady beat of Raymond's heart, feeling the familiar sense of safety and belonging that Raymond had always provided. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new opportunities to choose each other all over again. But tonight, sitting on their porch in the house they had bought together, raising the children they had adopted together, celebrating the promotion Raymond had earned with Eric's support and encouragement, everything felt perfect. Ready to go inside? Raymond asked eventually. In a minute. I want to stay here a little longer. Okay, we have all the time in the world. And they did. They had tonight and tomorrow and all the years stretching ahead of them. They had their children and their home and their careers and their dreams for the future. They had the deep, abiding love that had grown from friendship into something that had sustained them through 15 years of marriage and would sustain them through whatever came next. Most of all, they had each other. Eric and Raymond, still the same people who had fallen in love over coffee in Eric's kitchen, still choosing each other every day, still building a life together that was more beautiful than either of them had ever dared to imagine. As they finally made their way inside and got ready for bed, Eric found himself thinking about the conversation they had had with Sarah earlier, about knowing when someone is, quote, 368, about taking risks for love, about building a life with someone who feels like home. Quote 369, Eric asked as they brushed their teeth side by side at their bathroom sink. Quote 370, quote 371. Raymond smiled around his toothbrush. Quote 370, quote 37, quote 37. Raymond said, spitting out toothpaste and rinsing his mouth. Quote 37, quote of Shaun, quote of Shaun, and they climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for over a decade, in the bedroom they had painted together when they first bought the house. Raymond pulled Eric close, and Eric settled against his husband's chest with the ease of long practice. I'm proud of you, Eric said quietly, about the promotion, but also about everything, about the man you are, the father you are, the husband you are. I couldn't be any of those things without you. Yes, you could, but I'm glad you don't have to. Raymond pressed a kiss to the top of Eric's head. Quote 382, quoting Byron. Eric closed his eyes and let himself drift towards sleep, surrounded by the warmth and safety of Raymond's arms, grateful for every choice that had led them to this moment. They had taken the biggest risk of their lives when they had decided to cross the line from friendship to love, and it had given them everything they had ever wanted. In the morning, Eric woke up to the familiar sight of Raymond sleeping peacefully beside him, and his heart filled with the same gratitude and love he felt every morning. Some people spend their whole lives looking for their person, their home, their other half. Eric had found all of that in Raymond, first as a friend, then as a lover, now as a husband and co-parent and life partner. "Good morning," Raymond murmured, without opening his eyes, somehow always aware when Eric was awake and watching him. "Good morning. What's the plan for today?" "Same as always. Love you, raise our kids, build our life together." "Sounds perfect." And it was perfect, Eric thought, as Raymond opened his eyes and smiled at him with the same warmth and adoration he had been showing Eric for years. Not perfect in the sense that they never faced challenges or had disagreements or struggled with the ordinary difficulties of life. Perfect in the sense that they faced everything together, that they had built something strong enough to weather any storm, that they had found in each other exactly what they had been looking for without even knowing they were looking for it. From down the hall, they could hear Anthony starting to wake up, and soon Sarah would be stirring too. Their quiet morning moment would give way to the cheerful chaos of family breakfast and weekend plans and all the beautiful ordinary moments that made up their life together. But for now, it was just Eric and Raymond, still amazed after all these years by the love they had found in each other, still grateful for the risk they had taken, still choosing each other every single day. "I love you," Eric whispered. "I love you too," Raymond whispered back. And in that moment, lying in their bed in their house with their children starting to wake up around them, Eric felt the same overwhelming gratitude he had felt that first night when Raymond had told him he was in love with him. They had started as friends who were afraid to risk everything for love. They had become a family, a partnership, a love story that had grown stronger and deeper with each passing year. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories are the ones that catch you completely off guard, Eric thought as he listened to his husband's steady breathing and felt the warmth of the morning sun streaming through their bedroom windows. Sometimes the person you are looking for is right there beside you, and all you have to do is be brave enough to reach for them. Eric and Raymond had been brave enough, and it had given them everything. A love that felt like coming home, a partnership that made them both better people, children who felt safe and cherished, a life built on the foundation of choosing each other every single day. As Anthony's voice carried down the hall asking about breakfast and Sarah's alarm started going off in her room, Eric smiled and prepared to start another day in the beautiful, chaotic, perfect life he and Raymond had built together. Another day of being husbands, fathers, partners, best friends. Another day of the love story that had started with two scared young men who had been brave enough to risk their friendship for something more and had found everything they had ever wanted in each other. "Ready to face the day?" Raymond asked, echoing the same question he asked every morning. "Ready," Eric said, meaning it completely. They were ready for whatever came next because they would face it together. Just like they had faced everything else for the past 15 years, just like they would face everything for the rest of their lives. Together as partners, as husbands, as the family they had chosen to become. Eric and Raymond, still in love after all these years, still grateful for the risk they had taken, still building a life together, one beautiful, ordinary day at a time.